Hi everyone, Andrew here from WiZDOM, and I'm really excited to be bringing you a whole new topic, and it's certainly an important one. We have a lot of our clients come to us and say, how do we help our kids get into property? And you can certainly understand why, with property being more expensive than it ever has been before in Australia, and with borrowing getting tighter and tighter with increased interest rates and increased regulatory involvement, it's never been more difficult to get into the property market. So I certainly understand when parents are looking at their children and the property market and just thinking, I can't see how they're ever going to be able to get into it. Well, we thought with such an important topic that bringing a series of videos about how you can go about that and how you can leverage off your good position to assist your kids into the market would certainly be a valuable thing to do. But where I want to start that is not where you'd think. Rather than getting into the detail and the mechanics of actually physically how do you go about it, which we certainly will in future videos, instead, I wanted to talk about the thing that probably doesn't get talked about enough. And that is, what are your kids actually buying? And is it the right type of property to leverage off of into the future and the right starter property to help them get into the market? So what I mean by that is a lot of conversations with young adults is that their intent is they'll go into that nice new build property in the greenfield development. And instead, I think the conversation should be more about a really good starter property with future potential. So if we compare those two options, they look quite different. And I think that from a capital growth perspective and a future leverageability of that property, they look quite different as well. So the issue that I have with that nice new build, despite the fact that often there's government money and other things that support it, is that when you look at a greenfield development, yes, it's a very nice property to live in. It's new, it's flash, you can brag to all your friends about it, and I can certainly understand the attraction that sits behind it. But the issue that I have with that as a starter property is that while it's nice to live in, it's going to be suppressed in its future capital growth because new greenfield development will continue to happen. So the issue that we see play out over time with that style of property is that new developments continue to be developed out nearby. And as a result of that, developers selling house and land packages, obviously to other new entrants to the market and other people buying in that property market, they're trying to buy at the lowest possible price. They're trying to deliver that at the lowest possible price. And as a result of that, it suppresses all of the other property around it. It's very difficult to argue that your property is unique. And as a result of that, people are willing to pay more for it when there's lots of other very similar things just around it. So that for me is sort of option number one about what that starter property looks like. And from my view, I feel that you won't get any better than system growth or basically general capital growth on that property, and certainly not any special or additional capital growth. Because the reality is that property just won't be as sought after as other potential types of property could be in the future. So instead, if we compare that to option number two, and option number two I'd refer to as a good starter property. So there we're talking about a property that's got good future potential in it. And by future potential, I mean that you can manufacture growth, create growth, and value improvement in that property by being active with the property in some form. So the type of property that I'm talking about there is something that has a renovation opportunity or is in a great location and potentially could be redeveloped in the form of knock over and build a new property. Maybe you can subdivide it. Maybe you can put multiple properties in the future. Now, it doesn't actually matter whether your kids do that themselves. It's more a case of if that property has that opportunity in it, well, that opportunity is also one that would be sought after in the future and could be on-sold as well. So I would certainly encourage you to start having that conversation with your kids to maybe think away from that pretty property out in the greenfield development and instead be looking to secure the best future opportunity property that they could as they enter into the market. I feel that by comparison, that property, which often is in a better location than the greenfield development, because we're talking about older established suburbs and obviously proximity to CBD and central locations gets that property to be better and better again from a suburb perspective. Often that property from a capital growth perspective will play out better because the one thing you can never change, of course, is the location of the property. And it's the dirt that is worth money, less so than what's on it. So I would encourage all of you as parents to maybe be talking about, rather than going into the nice thing, look at that renovation property. Yes, it's not as nice to live in, but hopefully it's in a more convenient and a better location. Or that crappy old house on that big block of land, yes, that isn't fun to live in for a period of time as well. But what I do feel is that as the market plays out over a number of years, that property will absolutely experience the same level of capital growth and an even better level of capital growth than the greenfield development will by comparison, just purely because of its location and because that title of property is sought after. Now, in the meantime, if your kids want to be active, and assuming that at some point you're not going to redevelop that property and thus demolish it, your kids could certainly be active in the form of renovation or even a potential subdivision if the house doesn't necessarily need to be moved or anything like that. And yeah, that's not necessarily all that much fun to live in, but you are genuinely adding value to that property, which of course assists its overall value and its capital growth as well. So from my perspective, I actually feel that the good conversations about supporting your children in is also about guiding them and supporting them buying the right style of property to begin with. I genuinely believe that if you get that starter property right, the ability to be able to leverage off of that, either by sale and into the next property, or alternately, being able to leverage off of that to buy more property again, will certainly be better than, that option one in that greenfield development style. The other thing about that, and I think an important thing that needs to come up, is a good understanding when it comes to your kids that the first property that they buy is not going to be the only property they ever own. This absolutely is a starter property and a starter property of their property journey. It's not a one and done and you're never going to buy property again. So I think it's also really important to view this as a first purchase and a starter property, not necessarily a long-term thing. And I think sometimes that is overestimated, that a lot of people think, well, they're going to buy one property, they're going to stay in it forever, and that's all there is to it. No, the chances are, and certainly my experiences with my clients show, that a lot of the time that property will be retained as an investment property, it'll get redeveloped or something else. And of course, they'll go on and buy the next principal place of residence when they're in the financial position to be able to do so. So I think it's really important to talk openly about that and potentially guide and support your kids as they go through that decision making, because they are going to be influenced by a lot of other external influences, which are all driving that by the prettiest thing that you can, even if you have to leverage yourself really hard to do so. So anyway, hopefully that makes sense and maybe drive some different conversations. I think it's a great starting point for this before we even get to the detail as to how we go about it. Hopefully that's helpful. I look forward to bringing in the next few weeks all of the other videos as to how mechanically we'll make all of this happen, because again, we have a very strong view about the right way to go about supporting your kids and the wrong way of going about supporting your kids. And so I really look forward to unpacking that over the next few weeks. Until then, I look forward to seeing you soon. Happy investing and bye.